At 4:12 a.m., a Ukrainian F-16 held a steady line over the Black Sea. The cockpit was calm, no alerts, no evasive movement, no urgency. The pilot was not hunting. He was waiting. Russia, however, was running out of time. Only days earlier, precision strikes had removed more than half of its Iskander M launchers in the southern sector. Damage severe enough that delay was no longer an option. What survived had to be extracted before daylight because concealment was no longer possible. The decision was simple and desperate. Move the damaged launchers south toward Crimea for repair. If the convoy arrived long-range, strike capability could be rebuilt within months. If it did not, the southern front would lose that capability for the rest of 2026. The convoy was already on the road. 4 damaged Iskander M launchers moved through the night with fuel and support vehicles, lights-out engines steady, escorted by air defense assets and electronic warfare systems operating at full power. Radar coverage extended outward from Crimea, layered and confident. From the Russian perspective, this was a controlled withdrawal along a secured route. That assumption failed before the convoy ever reached open ground. Minutes earlier, a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone had already found it using thermal imaging. No lights were required, no visual confirmation was needed. Metal engines' fuel and mass bled heat into the cold air, and 16 distinct signatures appeared clearly on the operator's display. Coordinates were transmitted. The drone stayed high and patient. Nothing struck immediately because there was no need to rush. At 4:12 a.m., Ukrainian F-16s reached their release point, not to attack the convoy, but to provoke a reaction. Decoy systems separated cleanly from the aircraft and pushed forward, broadcasting electronic signatures indistinguishable from an inbound fighter formation. Russian radar operators saw fast-moving contacts closing. Waiting risked damage. Engaging meant exposure. They chose to engage. Air defense radars activated. Interceptors launched. In that instant, Russian defenses revealed themselves. Inside the F-16 cockpit, the change was unmistakable. The signal stabilized. A hostile radar source was confirmed, and a single anti-radiation missile was released. It guided itself home. Seconds later, the convoy's air defense escort lost its radar and coordination collapsed. Jamming continued, loud but blind noise without direction. The convoy kept moving, unaware that its protective layer had been stripped away. From Ukrainian command, the assessment was cold and final. The cover was gone, the route was open, and the first layer had been removed. What followed would be decided by timing. Low over-the-terrain strike drones were already inbound, flying beneath long-range sensor coverage, using terrain rather than speed. The convoy adjusted as crews reacted to uncertainty. Spacing widened. Speeds shifted. Electronic warfare systems flooded the air, disrupting traditional control links, a tactic that would have stopped older systems. These drones were built for that moment. As interference intensified, control shifted on board. Guidance no longer depended on radio commands. It locked onto what could not be jammed: heat. In the cold night air, engines, fuel tanks, and hydraulics burned bright. From above, the convoy stopped looking like vehicles on a road and became a line of glowing shapes moving through darkness. A new risk emerged when a Russian attack helicopter began a routine patrol in a nearby sector, its sensors sweeping for heat and motion. One drone briefly registered. The response was immediate. Altitude dropped. Course shifted. Terrain swallowed the signature. The helicopter continued on, unaware of how close it came to altering the outcome. The convoy pressed forward. Jamming remained active. From Ukrainian command, the picture did not change. The escort was degraded, the column exposed, and the trap was already closing. Air defenses were fragmented. The convoy had slowed not enough to stop it, but enough to narrow the window. That window was now measured in minutes. The next phase would not target movement or signals. It would target heat itself. The approach was complete. Alignment was set. The strike phase was about to begin. As the convoy entered the next stretch of highway, confidence was gone. Vehicles kept their distance. Crews stayed alert. Jamming systems continued at full power. To Russian operators, the air still felt protected. To Ukrainian command, the convoy was fully exposed. Strike drones closed the final distance at low altitude. They did not rush. Speed was secondary. Identification was everything. In the cold night air, the heat profile grew clearer by the second. Large engines, fuel tanks, and hydraulics retained warmth that could not be hidden. Even vehicles that briefly shut down continued to glow. As interference peaked, control links faded out completely. The drones no longer needed guidance. Onboard systems took over, locking onto the strongest heat sources ahead. The jamming that once protected the convoy now worked against it. Signals were useless. Heat remained. The lead drone selected a support vehicle positioned near multiple missile transporters. The goal was not to block the road, but to disrupt everything behind it. The drone committed. Seconds later, impact triggered a chain reaction. Fuel and equipment ignited, producing a sudden surge of heat and pressure. Flames expanded outward briefly, lighting the highway. Vehicles behind braked sharply. Others tried to maneuver, but space was limited. Secondary fires appeared within moments. Additional vehicles were damaged by proximity rather than direct hits. Formation collapsed as crews reacted without clear orders. From Ukrainian command, the effect was expected. The first strike was not about destruction alone. It was about confusion. Movement slowed dramatically. Spacing vanished. Vehicles clustered where they should not have. Remaining drones adjusted automatically, selecting new heat sources as they appeared. No signals were exchanged. No commands were needed. Each drone operated independently. The convoy was no longer a column. It was a series of isolated problems unfolding too fast to manage. For Russian crews, realization came late. Their protection was gone. Jamming was ineffective, and stopping only made them easier to find. The first impact had already changed everything. What followed would decide how much of the convoy survived until sunrise. By 4:25 a.m., the highway no longer functioned as a route. What had been a moving convoy became a broken sequence of stops, gaps, and sudden turns. Vehicles that escaped the first impacts accelerated, trying to outrun the growing heat behind them. Others slowed, boxed in by damage and limited space. The remaining Iskander launchers were still moving. The objective narrowed to a single goal: reach the final checkpoint before the bridge approach. Beyond that point, layered defenses could be restored. Repairs could begin. Survival depended on distance. Ukrainian command saw the same picture from above. Thermal feeds showed which vehicles were still operational and which no longer contributed to movement. The strongest heat sources now came from engines under heavy strain and systems running continuously in attempts to escape. The drones adjusted again. Rather than chasing individual vehicles, the next wave focused on the narrowing space ahead. Temporary structures, support areas, and maintenance zones near the bridge approach stood out clearly. These locations were warm, crowded, and filled with equipment positioned in anticipation of the convoy's arrival. The approach was careful and low. There was no need to rush. Air defenses capable of stopping them had already been degraded, and interference continued to mask movement from long-range detection. The next impacts were controlled and deliberate. Heat surged again, this time closer to the front of the remaining column. The immediate result was hesitation rather than a full stop. Vehicles slowed as drivers assessed blocked paths and damaged surfaces. What could have been a quick escape turned into a bottleneck. Road surfaces warped under stress and heat. Temporary structures were rendered unusable. Support equipment meant to speed repairs became obstacles instead. The bridge itself remained standing, but access to it was compromised. From Ukrainian command, the assessment shifted. This was no longer only about the convoy. The route itself had become unreliable. Surviving launchers turned back where possible. Others stopped completely. Movement in either direction became difficult. Jamming continued, but there was nothing left to protect. As the drones withdrew, the thermal picture told the full story. Most of the convoy no longer moved. What remained was scattered, delayed, and boxed in by damage. The escape window had closed. What remained on the highway would not reach Crimea before daylight. As the drones pulled away, the highway fell into an uneasy quiet. Not silence, but the absence of movement. Vehicles that had been racing south now sat scattered across lanes and shoulders. Some engines were still running, others had gone dark. From above, the difference was unmistakable. Heat told the story more clearly than any report. Ukrainian command reviewed the feeds without urgency. The objective had already been achieved. The convoy was no longer a convoy. It was a collection of isolated vehicles separated by damage-blocked routes and uncertainty. Even those still intact were going nowhere quickly. Thermal imagery showed the scale of the result. Most Iskander launchers were no longer operational. Their heat signatures were distorted and irregular. Support vehicles fared little better. Fuel trucks and transporters that survived initial contact were stranded among debris and damaged road sections. Attempts to reposition only increased exposure. Crews tried to reorganize. Communications resumed in fragments. Orders were issued, then revised. Some vehicles attempted to reverse. Others shut down completely, waiting for instructions that did not arrive. Without coordinated air defense and with the route compromised, further movement risked renewed detection. From a strategic perspective, the loss was immediate. These launchers were not easily replaced. Even those physically intact would require daylight recovery under observation. Repairs meant to be completed quietly in Crimea would now take far longer if they happened at all. With earlier losses combined with this operation, the southern Iskander force was no longer capable of sustained operations. What had once been a primary long-range strike element was reduced to a limited and fragile capability. The cost was minimal. A small number of drones and a brief air operation forced a disproportionate response, drained resources, and neutralized a critical asset. No prolonged engagement. No escalation along the route. Only timing, pressure, and patience. As dawn approached, the highway remained blocked and scattered. The window Russia had tried to outrun had closed completely. What remained was not a question of repair, but of consequence. By sunrise, the situation no longer required interpretation. The highway remained blocked, scattered with disabled vehicles and damaged infrastructure. What Russia had intended as a quiet recovery operation had become a visible failure. The surviving elements of the convoy were stranded exposed and waiting for daylight under conditions that made recovery slow and risky. For Russian command, the problem extended beyond the losses on the road. These missile systems were not reserve equipment. They represented a significant portion of the southern long-range strike force. Combined with earlier losses, that capability was now sharply reduced. Any attempt to restore it would require time, resources, and movement that could no longer be concealed. The route itself compounded the impact. Even without a collapsed bridge, damage to access points and surrounding infrastructure created delays that could not be ignored. Supplies, equipment, and reinforcements moving south would now face bottlenecks. Each delay added pressure to logistics already under strain. From Ukraine's perspective, the result reinforced a clear pattern. The operation did not depend on mass or prolonged engagement. It relied on detection timing and forcing the opponent to react. By triggering defensive systems at the wrong moment, Russia revealed what it was attempting to protect. Once exposed, the outcome was largely fixed. The cost imbalance was significant. A limited number of drones and a brief air operation compelled Russia to expend expensive interceptors, expose critical systems, and lose assets that were difficult to replace. Even equipment that remained intact now required visible recovery efforts, increasing vulnerability further. More importantly, the strategic message was clear. Movement alone no longer guarantees safety. Protection based on signals and concealment fails when heat timing and patience are applied together. What cannot be hidden eventually becomes a liability. By the end of the night, the result was set. The convoy did not reach Crimea. Repairs did not begin. The Southern Missile Force entered the next phase of the conflict weaker than before. The operation did not alter the war in a single moment, but it shifted the balance quietly and efficiently at the right time.